Live streamed.
All right, we are live and all set to go.
All right, thanks. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the April 14th meeting of the Design Review Committee. My name is Amy Paretsky, and I'm the chair of the Design Review Committee. This open meeting of the Design Review Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with the Governor Baker's executive order of June 16th, 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures. All members of the Design Review Committee are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows the Design Review Committee to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so going to the Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. I will now confirm member access to the meeting. Let's see. Lisa Maselli,
Present.
Dario DeMar.
Here.
Okay, and staff, Lori Connors.
Here.
Bob Federico.
Here.
The ground rules are, the chair will invite each speaker or applicant on the agenda. Oh, we have nobody on the agenda today. It's just us. Each speaker will be asked to mute their phone or computer when not speaking and speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate meeting minutes. Those responding will be asked to wait until the floor is yielded to them by the chair. Speakers who wish to respond to comments of others do so through the chair, taking care to identify themselves. Each vote taken by the board will be conducted by roll call vote. Let's see, it is now 8:39. And first on the agenda are the minutes. And I wasn't even gonna pull them up because I didn't have any changes. I had one little change, but I can mention it. Did anybody have changes that they wanted me to? Oh, Dario, okay.
Mine are just, I think, two typos.
Oh, okay.
On the second page, it starts with the paragraph that says on page 4.
Okay, I'm just gonna try to pull it up then and I'll make the
Yeah,
change.
Yeah,
I don't see share screen. Oh, here it is. Sorry. Okay, do you guys see them?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so second page.
it says on page 4, you already passed it. It's real close to the top. Okay. It says, shall be located on a lot matter that minimizes the amount of shadow cast
Oh, yep.
on the adjoining property. And then it says, Mr. DeMar said that there are times that shade and shadow matters, but it doesn't apply here for what they're doing.
Okay, but
And then- Exact. That's all I got.
okay.
Nice catch.
It's just typos. That's all.
Did you have anything, Lisa?
No, I did not.
Okay. The only thing I was gonna do, and it's just really small, at the very beginning, after the meeting was called to order, I just wanted to add, I don't even know how I was gonna word it. The Design Review Committee welcomed Lori Connors as the new town planner. Just, because that was Lori's first meeting, I think.
Nicely done.
Okay. Although I heard through the personnel meeting, it's gonna be called the, is it the director, planning director?
Yes, I'll be getting my old title back.
Should I put that in the minutes, or I'll just leave it as town planner for now, and then we'll be the planning director, right?
Yes, and of course, we just sent the cards, the business cards to print with town.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
So
well.
actually, it's already been decided, should I write planning director, just so, okay. If nobody has any more changes, do we have a motion to accept the minutes as amended?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, the minutes have been seconded. I'll have a roll call vote. Lisa Maselli
Aye.
and Dario Demar.
Aye.
Okay, I'll send those over to Michelle. Michelle does ours.
You get to vote too, Amy.
Oh, I'll vote yay, yes. And Dave wasn't here, but we didn't have very many changes.
Anything, so go for it.
You vote, Amy.
Okay, I vote aye. So the minutes have been approved and I'll send them over to Michelle. Silly. And I'll have to stop sharing. Okay. So next on the agenda will be back to the what are they called? Two-family dwelling guidelines. And I just want to make a quick note first that if everybody agrees, what I'm thinking today is try to get through the wording and then we'll go back to the pictures after, because we can get stuck on a picture for a long time and I kind of want to get through the wording. And Lori had thrown out some examples and we had discussed before, at least a couple of us, that some of the pictures really are for the closer to the city. They're not really pictures of duplexes that we have in Northborough. So Lori came back with some examples. And another idea is maybe just to include the encouraged ones versus discouraged ones, because a lot of times when you include the discouraged, it might have some of the features that we actually encourage on the other side, even though it has a discouraged part of to it. I don't know. Does it make sense to everybody that we just go back to the pictures after?
Sure.
Just to move this along quicker. Okay. And also, I was going to open it up to Lori to run through the document because she sent it out and she had made changes and that way she can speak to her changes. We'll still go through it section by section. But since Lori had the most recent changes, I think I'm going to let her go through the document.
And we're gonna start at the beginning again, right?
Yeah, because she added a couple things at the beginning. So she can go through those and quickly, and then we will continue where we left off. Do you mind, Lori?
No, not at all. So I
Okay.
shared my screen. So everybody should be able to see the draft that I emailed out to you the other day. So the first change that I made was in response to a question that you had, Amy, about who should be the most the most appropriate person to determine the 50% taxable value. And I think that is Bob, because he, of course, is going to be the one to see the building permit application. And I believe they assign value as part of the building permit application. Are you okay with that, Bob?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. We assign a value for construction purposes only at the beginning of the application process. It doesn't have any bearing on the taxable value of the building unless the assessors want to take that value. We use the value of the building to come up with a fair and reasonable and consistently calculated building permit fee. So that being said, as I said before, it doesn't have any necessary bearing on the market value of the building. That comes when, you know, the sale of the building is actually sold to the first owner. You know, that would be considered the market value. So there is a disconnect between the value that I assign to a building and the value that the assessors set. once the original ownership is established.
I think that this would be for modifications, so if they're doing an addition on an existing building, or if they're renovating the building.
I
So
think
how
what
do you
Bob-
assign the value in that case?
I think Bob assigns the value of the project, the tax assessor assigns the value of the building as it exists.
Right.
Because Bob's not an appraiser, nor are any of us. So there's two values here. The project value, which Bob is, that's his job. He sits with the GC, they give an estimate. It's gonna cost $100,000. And then what is the building worth? Either the market or the taxes will determine the building value. And then if it's 50% of that or more, then different codes kick in.
One of the other things to add to that, and Dario's right. One of the other things to consider is that in, I'll call it olden days, the value of the, especially for 1 and 2 family residentials, the value of the building came under scrutiny in terms of what's the value of the building and what's the value of the construction, and you compare the two. Now, these days, that financial package has been taken out. It's now the square footage of the building in terms of what needs to be brought up to code, or how much is, what parts of the building need to be, upgraded. So it's kind of a little bit of a gray area here. But it's the old way of thinking is that it's 50% of the value of the building. Now it's a percentage of the building that you're actually working on. One of the few times that financials like 50% of the building come into play is when you're doing work that has anything to do with the architectural access board, and that is typically in a construction environment. They do still have a 30%, 50% value of construction value versus property value. But you won't see that in a 1 and 2 family application.
So what exactly so when you're determining ADA compliance, you're looking at the value of the construction? So it's a percentage of the value of the construction or the value of the building, and who defines the value of the building? Would that be the assessor's office or somebody else?
The generally accepted value of the building is from the assessor's office. And that's our benchmark. If the proposed construction exceeds more than 50%, then the entire building needs to be brought up. If by chance that 50% threshold is met over a period of 3 or 4 years, the aggregate look back of the value of the construction does count towards the 50% ratio of the building value. There's been unscrupulous contractors over the past few years that'll do 20% and 20%, on 2 different projects. And then they come back with another 20% value, over the course of 3 or 4 years. And the AAB caught on to that. And at that point, with the 3rd project, within a certain timeline, they will make them redo the whole house, the whole building.
Okay.
And Lori, and I think Bob spoke of this, which is probably, and Bob, you can address this. The ADA codes apply more to commercial, well, probably easier put, don't apply to single family homes and duplexes. So the value assessment, I don't think belongs here, but the square footage assessment belongs here because those are building codes to deal with structure and fire and safety and everything else. And we just finished a project in Arlington, and we actually had an appraiser come in because the taxes hadn't been brought up to date. They appraised it, the town recognized it, they put the assessment in, and then that became the new value to deal with the ADA code. And so, Bob, I don't know that the 50% applies here with respect to handicap. I think the one that applies here is just the building, the square footage.
It's the square footage. AAB has a distinct exclusion for
Yeah.
single, two-family and townhouses.
Lisa,
What
did
would
you-
be the appropriate language here? So if we're gonna base it on square footage, what would be the appropriate standard?
The project, I would refer it back to not even the building inspector, but the Massachusetts Residential Building Code.
But we should put, I agree. I think the valuation shouldn't be used in this case. It should be the size, because we're more concerned with its visual on the outside, not its value.
Well, another thing that I was kind of concerned about is, as we continue on with this paragraph, what if the changes that they're proposing are just interior to the space? So they're not proposing any exterior changes at all.
If they
Then-
are-
And what if we're talking about a historic structure? So would we mandate that they go to design review even though they're not proposing any sort of exterior changes?
State
Okay.
zoning bylaws prohibit any involvement of a special permit granting authority to work on the interior of the house.
Right.
For
But I think that the interpretation here is that they will be mandated to change the exterior of the house if the renovations exceed whatever the threshold is of the square footage. And is that really what we want to do? I thought that the only thing that you want to do here is you want to oversee exterior changes to the building.
I totally agree. I think it's this exterior. Why are we talking about interior? We don't oversee interior. That whole paragraph, I think, needs to be rewritten because it handles taxable structure, which has got nothing to do with what we're doing. It's if the exterior is expanded by X amount, right, square footage exterior, then that's something we should be looking at. But other than that, it's we got an appointment to see the Hot Rocks or whatever it was, health club that was going into an existing building, but it was all interior. It had nothing to do with us, and it was taken.
Okay, so right now, we're doing apples and oranges and zebras and sheep. So if it's interiors, it's none of our business. That's cut
Right.
and dry. But if it's a renovation, it doesn't have to be an addition. But if they're gonna completely redo the facade and value, or they wanna re-side the building with metal siding, that would be exterior. But while they're doing that, with or without an addition or subtraction, if that value then goes beyond the 50%, I'm sorry, not even the value, the square footage goes beyond the 50%, the codes kick in. The value part has nothing to do with residential. It does multifamily, but not single family. So interior additions, we don't touch, we don't mess with. But if they're doing a renovation and it involves interior and exterior, it kicks in for us because now we're looking at the addition. So they may only be pushing out the wall 2 feet, one spot to add a porch, but at the same time, if they're gutting the house, that's the cost of the project. And unfortunately, there's nothing in the codes that says, well, the value of the piece that you could see, it's the value of the project. The project is the construction cost. And that will apply if we can see it. If we can't see it, it's none of our business. And then if we can see it, as Bob had said, it's really square footage, not cost with respect to ADA, because ADA is out of this, but square footage will say, oh, if you're gonna spend this much on the building, you now have to have the smokes and everything else put in to come up with the current code. It's no longer pre-existing non-conforming. Everything has to meet current code if the square footage exceeds a certain threshold. Does that sound right, Bob?
It sounds pretty darn close to it. Again, you've got to remember what the structure is for and the use that it's for and how you're going to address and what are the thresholds. I mean, that's the tricky part. That's why I say, it should be, any additions, expansions of the footprint should be the Mass Building Code. It's a little difficult to read it on the cell phone. But basically, you've got it right.
Do we want like Lori and Bob to come up with something and then we can send it out after we do all our changes today and then we can read it again next time, just so we can move on? If it's gonna take a little bit to figure out how to word it properly.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm happy to do that with Bob.
That's fine.
because we have the gist of what we want to say. But to make it sound right, it might take a little bit of time. It's up to everybody else and move on to the next thing, but we still have
Perfect.
a chance to review it next time. We'll come back and look at it.
All right. So the next change that I made was just, a little grammatical. I think instead of active, you meant attractive, but I wasn't exactly sure.
Yeah, Judy
Maybe-
wrote that, so whatever makes more sense.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought active was interesting too.
All right, so moving right along. One thing that I noticed in the zoning bylaw and the rules and regs is that above ground utilities are actually still permitted. And I haven't seen that in decades. Most towns eliminated above ground utilities many, many years ago. So that's a suggestion that I'm going to make for a change to the regulations going forward. But since that's still in the regulations that above ground utilities are okay, I thought we might want to include it in the design standards that they're not okay. And that's all part of the, attractiveness factor. And, certainly when you're talking about storms and tree limbs coming down, it's much better to have your utilities underground because then they won't be snapped by falling limbs. And so that's just a suggestion that I wanted to make. If you guys are okay with it?
Yes. So the way you're saying it, you're going to have it on our list for the planning board bylaw for next town meeting
Yeah.
to update it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Will you keep I'm sure you will keep a running list of little changes we have to make.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep. You had mentioned too, one thing I asked you about offline was about the driveway, because for the last duplex, Lori wasn't on the, wasn't the planning director yet, but our driveways go right up the side of, we can go right up to the side of the next neighbor's house. So there's nowhere to push snow, there's nowhere to put landscaping and nowhere to put a fence. And Lori had mentioned that the town she was in, Millbury, there's like a 10-foot setback off of the property line before you can put a driveway. So that was
Yeah.
another thing. I was wondering if we could get into the bylaws for next year to add to the list. I don't know. Yeah,
Absolutely. I'd
at
be
least
happy to
5 or
add
10
that.
feet, because we do run into that where everybody builds right up to the line and there's no place to put a fence, landscaping, or snow.
What is the standard right now for single-family homes?
On most of the projects I'm working on, it's a 5-foot impervious setback. In other words, you can't pave within 5 feet of a side yard of a property. They vary in the front yard and they're different than the building setbacks, because quite often the side yard setbacks, if it's a really tight neighborhood, could be 10 feet or 20 feet. If you're if you're in a real urban area, it's less than that because the lots are only 50 feet wide, so all of a sudden it's a little bit sensitive to where you are, but normally the impervious is 5 feet. So no parking or driveways can be allowed within 5 feet for all those reasons that you stated. 10 is a bit aggressive unless it's a huge lot, you might want to enforce that, but the standard I've seen everywhere is 5, but that's totally up to you guys.
What do we have right now for single family setback?
0.
I think we have 0, exactly.
Zero. So if
Thank
side
you.
by side, two neighbors could pave both of their driveways right along the property line, and you have this huge impervious surface, and when people are plowing their driveways, they're pushing it onto each other's yards.
Yeah, 0 doesn't really work in most cases.
So are we deciding on 10 or 5? I think we better 10, and then for those that are smaller, you could do a,
I'm
variance.
just saying, I see 5 almost everywhere. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, because that's different than a building setback.
I do think that 5 would work, because of course, remember that you have that narrow lot, kind of the pork chop lot provision that only has the 50 feet of frontage. So like Dario said, that might be a little bit tight for folks.
And remember, it's 5 and 5 when it's all said and done, so you have 10 feet between if both guys are complying. If you're pre-existing non-conforming, the least you'd ever have would be 5 on a new project.
Okay. It's a good start. We'll add that to Lori's list for next year too. I'm so happy that she can keep the list. Usually I'm trying to keep a list.
So a question that I had was pertaining to the bullet that was deleted, continue to accommodate 2-family homes as a traditional housing choice in the town of Northborough, especially in many of the town's older neighborhoods where 2-family homes already exist. Yeah, personally, I like that one, so I was just wondering what the argument was for deleting it.
I took it out because I thought I was trying to cut back on the size of the document. So I was taking out things here and there. And I felt as a design review committee, if a project came in front of us, our job was to work with the building design for the 2-family. But I didn't think our purview was to continue to accommodate 2-family homes. Like, I don't think the design review allows or denies any 2-family housing. We're just trying to make it look nice. So I just didn't think it met with what we were trying to do. We're trying to look at the design part of the house. And when I read continue to accommodate 2-family homes, I look at it as we're either permitting or denying.
Okay, yeah, that makes
I don't know.
sense.
That's just the way I read into it.
Yeah, I think that you were trying to shorten it up so people would actually use it and understand it. And I don't think anybody disagrees with what's written here. It was the appropriateness of, that's not in our purview to say yes or no. We're here to just say, let's make it look nice.
Right. I agree.
I think that's why it was. We were just trying to shorten it up to make it easier to use.
Yeah.
I remember you doing that. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, right, that kind of makes sense.
Which is why the catalyst came out too. Like, the person coming in to do a design, they don't care why, they just want to follow the rules that they have to follow.
Yes, I agree with that. Okay, down below, in the interest of shortening, my suggestion is to remove anything that is already in the zoning bylaws. And one of the rationales for that is when you change something in the zoning bylaws, then you're going to have to go ahead and change the design guidelines to match the zoning bylaw change. Instead, just put a reference to the zoning bylaw section, and then you won't have to worry about that in the future, having some sort of inconsistency with the zoning bylaw.
Makes
I'm
sense.
fine with that.
I like having the chart there. I think it's,
Oh.
there's benefit to having these numbers up quickly when somebody's looking at it quickly than asking them to go through the whole zoning bylaw book. And I mean, how often has it changed? Doesn't change all that much, but I would say keep it in. And it says the lot requirements may change underneath. So that's my opinion on that.
right? Maybe the others, do you folks have an opinion one way or the other? So we can decide what to do here.
I'll tell you, there's two good, Lisa makes a good point. It's very interesting. As a layperson, it's so much easier to have it in front of you because going through the codes is a complete nightmare trying to find everything. And I think if you put a reference and they find it, that's perfect. As an architect, I don't ever want to put the same thing on a set of drawings, because if I forget to change it one spot and it's in the other spot, the people will always pick the cheaper or the less stringent because we have it in both spots. So redundancies are a maintenance nightmare, yet ease of use. It's really, this one, I could go either way because both points make all the sense in the world, and for completely different reasons. And maybe Dave can say something if ease of use or make sure there's no, redundancy or conflict, because, and if you put a note and say the current codes supersedes anything here, it may cover us to do both. But I know one of the worst things we can do is have the same information somewhere twice, because if you change it, you forget to change it everywhere, it's a nightmare for everyone.
I agree. It's a double-edged sword because it can also be used against you in a negative way. You got to be careful. So, it makes sense on both sides. So it's you got to go with whatever is most prevailing.
I'm almost thinking leave it because I do think it's quick, and the design review guidelines aren't really, if there is a question, it has to go back to what's in the zoning bylaws because that's what they legally have to stick to. And hopefully, since the planner is on both boards, hopefully if it gets updated in one place, it will in the other. And I know how it can definitely fall through the cracks, but I don't know. I'm torn too.
What's
I
the
can just-
legality of this document though? Can this, you know what I mean? Dario, where does that fall in? Or I mean, we're not attorneys, obviously.
Well, no, but this document, to Amy's point, this is a guideline.
Mm.
Right.
And it has no teeth. We can only recommend. We can't make anybody do anything. Our whole board can't make anybody do anything. We can only recommend. But maybe it's really simple. In the bullet at the bottom, we put, these are just the guidelines, the current, go to the section. So then we're doing what Lori says, which makes a lot of sense. Go to section blank point, blank point, blank for the most current and legal and binding tables, or, something that, because they supersede, or this section supersedes anything we have here. So
Yeah.
they don't come back and say, well, I saw it there and now you're making me change it. I did all the design. I want you to pay for a whole new set of drawings. Then at least we make it really clear that this is our guideline, that the current code on this section is what's enforced if there's any discrepancy.
That sounds good.
Then there's a bullet there and it makes it at least covers everybody's tail, because we're not trying to mislead anybody. This would be one of those honest mistakes that we're trying to avoid.
Yep.
And I think then you do both. Then it's a good doc. I can look at it, I find out what the rules, I do my design. Oh, I better check, because if there's change, then it's on me. Because then you can say, well, sir, madam, we put it here because the code supersedes everything we have in the guideline. And that's probably a statement here somewhere anyway. No matter what we say, current and active mass building codes and town codes supersede anything in a guideline book, period. But you don't want that encompassing one to catch people with later on. Our goal isn't to trick people. It's to make it easy to use. And yet not, have them make a mistake, and because everybody loses if they have to come back later on. That's good for nobody. So I think it's weird because I feel both points are very important. And if I had my drawings and I could do that, well, we do in some cases. We actually say specifications always supersede the drawings. if there's a conflict. And if there is a conflict and you see it, you're obligated to notify us. I mean, we try to do that because sometimes we do write the same thing twice. And I think that's what Lori's trying to avoid, which makes perfect sense. And I think Lisa's saying, let's make it easy on them. They're not lawyers. So that's enough on this one from me.
Maybe in the first paragraph at the top, there can be a sentence that, you know, the bylaws and the Mass Building Code supersede, you know, these are just guidelines, and maybe Lori can come up with a sentence.
I think you do it underneath the chart that does, like right now that you have something there as opposed to calling it out. I think it's, you know, that's good.
Okay.
She could put something as simple as see section blank for current and enforceable dimensions.
What I could do in the heading where it says dimensional requirements, I could do it right there as
That'd be perfect.
referenced in section whatever in the zoning bylaws.
Right.
So as part of the heading.
I think that's fine, you know, and zoning bylaws take preference.
Or current zoning bylaws.
Right.
And is the
Okay.
building going to go on that table or another table?
The building height? We should add to that table.
Correct.
I haven't yet because I didn't take that on.
I can do that.
Okay, thanks.
You have enough room to put it on the, you know, the next right of minimum open space, right?
Yep. Then I had the same comment on the definition of building height,
Can we,
because that comes from the zoning bylaws.
Yeah, if we put it on the table, then that would apply.
yeah, because you've already got the dimensional on there saying to go to whatever zoning bylaws to confirm if you want to.
Okay. All right, next under site planning guidelines, let me move down. I suggested adding some additional language, architectural style and citing. So the citing kind of goes back to what we talked about last time, that there should be a careful consideration about the topography and grading. And there should also be minimum disruption to the existing topography. So we don't want, you know, if there's a hill, one thing that has been a problem in my experience is people are bent on having walkout basements, but that doesn't always work with certain topography. So then they end up excavating out the hill and creating a bowl effect, which ends up being a drainage nightmare. So I don't think that that's something that we want to encourage. We want them to take into consideration what the topography of the land is and ensure that the duplex matches that topography.
I agree.
I agree.
Okay, so you're okay with this language?
Yeah. And are we going to use, Dario had talked about it before about using a, what is it, a circle of area to, it may not be in this section, but I think it should be, to complement the neighborhood. Remember we talked about that the last time? Like you were going to take a certain amount of area in a radius to justify what massing and such were.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to quantify in a neighborhood because some neighborhoods are big and some neighborhoods are small, and it could be a linear neighborhood, you know, so then the circle covers the middle, but the two sides are completely different that are outside, I'll call the visible street that you're building on. You know, like I'm in a tiny little neighborhood and you know, the houses are very different than all the adjoining neighborhoods. And if you put a circle around it, you don't want to impose on the people that have different types of houses because of the circles. It's a tough thing, Lisa, to do. Because it can't be within the town, but I think the word neighborhood is probably the best definition, and that's a little subjective, but neighborhood makes the most practical sense. Because you can see a neighborhood and we connect to other neighborhoods, which I love, but it wouldn't be fair if all of our houses were big and then the circle encompassed, a bunch of little houses and they're building in the area with the little houses, and then you're forcing them to build a big house because they could say, well, these are big and I want to. It's just hard to define. I think neighborhood works, to a limit. I mean, 1,000 feet is, then, all right, that's not the neighborhood anymore. At a certain point, it's outside. I don't know if Lori or you guys have other thoughts on that.
Well, that's why I was trying to come up with wording. So that's why I included the words functional or visual relationship. So if you have like a little cul-de-sac that has five houses on it, and then you have the main street. Well, the houses that are on the main street don't really have a visual relationship to the units that are going to be built on the cul-de-sac. So the units that are going to be built on the cul-de-sac have more of a visual and functional relationship with those that are on the cul-de-sac. So that's kind of what I was trying to get at with words.
Well, I think it's good. I think the reason that we actually brought the thought of neighborhood, and I like the word neighborhood, maybe we can redefine a little bit of what neighborhood might encompass, is the latest duplex that came before us on Hudson Street that is huge. And when asked the applicant, how it fit in with the character of the neighborhood, he used the commercial or industrial building a little bit further down the road as, well, that's big, therefore this falls within the neighborhood.
Yeah, another thing that I'm a little bit scratching my head about too is that there may be circumstances where you have an area that's kind of dilapidated that is changing over. And so you may have, currently very small single family homes, but the neighborhood is turning over and those small single family homes are being demolished and other homes are being built in their place. So are you trying to prevent that from happening? Like what's the motivation about the size? Because that typically is what's happening, is that, it's kind of mansionization of neighborhoods. So you have demolition of like the starter homes, and those are being replaced with larger single family homes, maybe duplexes. So is that what you're trying to fight against, the mansionization of neighborhoods, or where are we going with it, I guess? That's more, wouldn't that be more of a master plan thing? I don't know. I personally think that if we're wanting to keep it with the neighborhoods, like if you have a smaller neighborhood, then a duplex by its original nature was to make affordable housing, make it easy. We have two smaller structures put together. And so those structures were usually less expensive because there were two in one spot. Now that's not the case anymore. Now they're, if not as expensive, they may be more expensive than some single family homes. So when do you create the standards? I don't know that they've even been created yet. It's what we want to see in the neighborhoods anymore, because we have so much unusual structures. We have antique pieces that are being torn down that might just be 800 square feet. And then all of a sudden now you're going from 800 square feet to, 6,000 square feet plus garages. So I don't know that that's necessarily a question that we can set now here at design review, but we should
kind of get that, whether it's a master plan or not, in my estimation.
All right, I'm thinking maybe that's a bigger discussion for a bigger day and a longer day. Maybe we'll just keep going through here. And for now, we'll use this sentence if we all agree with it, but then we can circle back to that discussion during another meeting, if everybody's okay.
I agree, but I think one thing I would change now just to hit Lisa's point, which is a great point, where the sentences says duplexes should fit the character of the neighborhood, massing, blah, blah, blah. I would say that duplexes should fit the character of the duplexes within the neighborhood, so that I'm not comparing my duplex to a factory, saying, oh, look, the factory's big, so my house could be big. So I think our intent here is to have the houses kind of blend together. And if there happens to be a big old, mill building that happened to be there a bazillion years ago, we don't use that as the benchmark. My house could be as big as the mill building because it's next door, because that's not the intent. And then we're really making the houses blend with other houses, which is, I think, our intention, not to make the house it blend with a warehouse.
Right.
What if there are very large single-family homes in the neighborhood?
And it blends.
What if there are no duplexes in the neighborhood?
Right, I agree with that. I don't know if you could use the duplexes twice, maybe the homes. Can you use the word homes? Does that separate industrial use from residential use?
I could say duplexes should fit the character of the residential dwellings within the
Yes.
neighborhood.
That's perfect,
Good job.
because that's our intent.
Okay. All right, so we're all set there. Moving on, what I was trying to do is just clarify the highlighted area. So I think what we're aiming for is that there would be a principal facade. So it's not going to look like the side of a house on the other street. So you have a front and then you have a side that may not have any windows and won't have any doors. So what you want, I think, is you want it to look interesting. So not
Nice.
necessarily like the front of the house, but like a second level front of a house. Right? Is that what you're trying for?
It should just be presentable, yes.
Okay.
And the thing for me though is like one point I was trying to make, and maybe I'm wrong, is if it's a corner lot, I don't think you need to have a door on each side. Like, what if it makes sense for that lot that both of the doors are on one street and not the other? I guess that was the only thing. I didn't want to make it be too restrictive where you are stuck putting one door on one street and one door on the other street. That was my only point when talking about corner lots.
And that makes perfect sense. I don't think, because you could have a really busy street and you could have a really, just small street. And where the two entrances go really should be irrelevant, just so that the house is, just visually appealing for both
Yeah.
sides, whether it's one and one. And because I would personally rather enter the house on the slow street, but if it's a nightmare to get in, because every time I back out, someone's turning off the busy street and then I'm going to get, run over. So I would leave that up to the architect. I don't think we should say you have to have one door on each street, because it just might not make sense, especially if one of the streets is really busy. You could argue now that if you abut 290, that you have to have one of your entrances facing 290. If you're on a corner lot between a residential neighborhood, and that would really be broken. So I think what Lori said, that it should meet all the requirements of the aesthetics from both fronts, because we're going to treat them as fronts.
So is this revised language better? should have a visually appealing facade on each street.
Yep.
Do you like that better?
The 2 front yards makes it very clear as well, because we then define the front yard qualifications.
Yeah, I think you're right. And a good example of just what you said, Dario, is on Main Street and East Main Street next to what the Sammy's building. There's a duplex right next to it. And it's pretty, they did a beautiful job. But one comes right onto Main Street and it's very close and very highly active, and the other street is mild. But one thing I don't want to see is again, I like front facing, so I don't know if there's some way to make sure that.
I think that says it. I think that, yeah. The front yards, I think, says it.
Okay. So then another sentence that I added is I wanted to provide for duplexes that don't have garages, and believe it or not, there are some. So in those cases, the parking areas should be either to the side or the rear of the units.
That sounds good to me.
Okay. Let's see. I did delete this language. No more than one driveway per 2-family dwelling shall be permitted on each street unless the lot has at least 150 feet of street frontage. I was trying to think of a circumstance why a unit would need to have 2 driveways. And then I was also concerned about the shared or common driveway, because elsewhere you talk about, well, just down below, decreasing the size of the driveway width. And so if you're going to require them to have a common driveway, then they're going to have 40 feet of pavement along the front yard. So what they're going to do is they're going to put the 2 garages next to each other, and they're going to have a giant driveway to service those garages. Whereas I thought that the point was to separate the driveways and have a landscaping area in between. So
That
that's
makes
why I
sense to
deleted
me.
that.
Makes sense to me.
Okay. And then we go back to the width. And I still feel strongly about the 20-foot width, because if you have 2-car garages, then you need to provide sufficient space for people to park in front of the garages and be able to open their doors and walk around the cars. Otherwise, people are going to be driving over grass.
And for me, if I start, I did go out and I sent you guys an email, but I did go out and measure my driveway, and it's only 14 feet wide. And there's so many times I wish it was wider, because we do drive over the grass all the time. So I don't know.
What is the standard width of a garage, a 2-car garage?
Anywhere from 20 to 24 feet.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Dario.
Parking space is 9 by 18, but so the garage has to have enough clearance. You know, you can get in out of a 9 by 18 parking space. So typically the least you want per car is 10 in a garage.
And once again, you know, the front setback is only 30 feet. So there really isn't enough space when you're thinking about the standard car length to have like a super narrow driveway that then widens within a span of 30 feet.
And Lori, I guess when I go down Ridge Road, every single one of those duplexes has about a 10-foot driveway, and they widen out back to the 2-car garage. So if you have a 30-foot frontage and you build to the frontage, then maybe the 12-foot doesn't make sense. But if you're set back like every single one that I've seen, then and I literally went by again, and each one of them has 3 cars in the drive, you know, never mind what's in the garage. Every single one, and they all have the narrow drives if you were to look at them. So I think if you push it to the extreme of we're going to build to 30 feet, then it would be hard to recommend 12 feet because, you know, a car space is 20 feet deep. You can't even get too deep in a 30-foot setback. So in that case, the wider drive would make sense. In a case like all the ones around me, they all already have the narrow drive up front. And they're set back further, all the duplexes. If you go down, you know, just Ridge is an example, and there's, I think every single one I went by except one had 3 cars in the drive, and they don't have to drive over the grass because then it flares down to 12 where it hits the road because they're set back further. So
Maybe that's a discussion that can take place when on a project by project basis, because there are a significant number of duplexes around town that are not set back far from the
Exactly.
road. And so, you know, you don't want to make a standard that is just going to apply to those that are set back 50 feet from the road.
agreed 100%. And maybe we just say shall not exceed 12 feet, or we shall be as narrow as possible given the setting of the house on the site, because, you know, because then with 30 feet, you have to have it too wide. There's no doubt. You know, and there's a lot of neighborhoods, we do a lot of senior living that way, where you drive in right off the road, there's 2 spaces in the front, and then there's a 2-car garage behind it, because you can only fit 1 car deep on a 30-foot setback. But so maybe we shall strive to have a 12-foot minimum drive where the site permits, otherwise a max of 20 feet. Because then you're really stating the intent, and it allows everybody to do everything in a fair and reasonable way without, you know, 80 feet in the front.
Right.
I don't know. If you want, maybe I could, I'm okay with the 20 feet at this point because there are circumstances where that makes sense. But I think I've seen enough of them around, you know, so many where they're set back, and then the 12 feet does make sense. And I would encourage 12 if you could. But if it's built to the front lot, then 20 makes absolutely perfect sense.
Well, I like what you said about we strive to whatever the rest of that sentence was. And
Minimize the width of the curb cut.
yeah, well, see, and then the curb cut should be more narrow, I think, and then flare out as it gets into the property, because now you're having 2 cars come out at the same time or what have you. And on Ridge, those don't have garages. Those are just long driveways with parking area.
But if it's 30 feet, then the curb cut's going to be 20 feet because you have to back straight out. You really can't do any manipulating. So I think that's where Lori's spot on.
So that's why using that, the 2 different numbers makes sense, because it gives us some variety to use. Like,
Right, where permissible, we recommend a 12-foot curb cut, unless, unless it's hard to achieve. I could think of words, but I think, because then everybody gets the point. We want less paving, but we don't want to limit people to live in their homes.
And that's why I thought moving the sentence in the paragraph below up, where it says large expanses of impervious surfaces are strongly discouraged, we can add that sentence to whatever sentence we create here, so they get the intent.
yes, I like that.
Yeah, that's
How
good.
about these words that I just typed?
You're a superhero.
Okay. All right, moving on. I thought, because I know the design review committee looks at landscaping, so I thought it would be important to put some guidance in the document about landscaping.
You like it?
Okay.
I like it too.
So the standards that are here, having to do with the intervals of trees from overhead utilities, came from National Grid's guidance. So I know that they'll be okay with it. And I thought that street trees are important to include. So you're okay with it, the words here? Okay. So I'll just move that to the back of the document because it probably makes the most sense there. Just asking a question. Oh, there are some places where it says shall, and of course, these are guidelines, so they're not regulations. So I tried to soften some of those shalls into mays and shoulds. Is that okay?
Well, some of it does say in the beginning, it's a guideline, but then as you read the first couple of paragraphs, it talks about standards. So how do you change that? I mean,
I guess the guideline part is a guideline and that's a fact. And the minute you put may in, I'm ignoring them. You put shall, you're saying, here's our guideline. This is what you should do, what you should do, not what you must do. And I think, because if I hear may, I'm like, okay, we don't have to do that. That's just a recommend. We don't have to do it. It's just a weird way of interpreting it, because when we work for the developers, they hear may, they go right past the sentence. If they say they shall do it, then they also know, hey, this is just a guideline, because that's stated right up front. These are guidelines. Here's what we want you to do. You should do this. You should do that. You should do this. You should do that. And the minute we put mays in, they ignore them. And then Bob could speak to that. Mays mean you don't have to.
Can speak to it. My first time on the planning board, my first couple applications, we work so nicely and all these things and like, oh yeah, maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll do that. But nothing with maybe ever got done. So like the third person who came in, the third applicant, and I said, can you put a sidewalk in? He goes, well, maybe. I said, I have learned what maybe means. Maybe is a no.
Yeah, I was just saying, I mean, the planning board is the enforcement authority and the design review is an advisory. So
Exactly.
that is what I was thinking. So the power sits with the planning board to require.
But-
So,
I agree, to Dario's point, I agree. This is just a little added document that somebody picks up and looks at. And I think we need to make it more standard looking than maybe. Right? I agree with that word.
okay.
It would help just because then when it gets to the planning board, we know, okay, this is what they really wanted, If we say may and then they don't do it, the planning board might not know that because it was a guideline, the design review really wanted to do this, but they had no teeth, so it didn't happen.
Guys,
So we-
unfortunately, I gotta like to bite in, but I got a truck that just broke down out here and we got a big problem out in the lot here, so I gotta sign off and take care of this problem.
We'll probably
I'm
keep going
sorry.
till 10. Do you mind? We're just gonna keep going?
No problem, but I gotta deal with this.
Sure.
I gotta-
Yeah, and you can read it after. You'll be able to read
No
all the
problem.
pages.
Sorry about this.
All right, good luck.
All right, thanks, bud.
The next section that was deleted, I thought that is something that you folks said that you wanted to have as an option to decrease the massing of the building so that they could have, especially on corner lots, you could have one duplex entrance on one street and one duplex entrance on the other street. So I wonder if we could keep this, but instead of saying shall, say may. So it's an option. They don't have to do it, but it's an option that you folks would see as being favorable.
That's probably why I crossed it out where it said shall on opposite streets, because I was trying to make it match what I crossed out up above.
Was
Okay,
it-
so you're okay with.
But I'm
putting
okay
that
with
in?
may. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
Well, isn't that redundant? I mean, don't we already, can't we put it in such a way that covered entries would go, you've already said about where the doors are on the front, what do you call it? The front yards and things. Isn't this kind of a?
This isn't in the document elsewhere.
Yeah, so I would take it out if it's in
No,
elsewhere.
it is not.
Oh,
This is the only time it appears, because remember above, you had me take out the doorway on the side.
Right, duplexes on corner lots.
So this is the only location where where people would see that you're encouraging one unit to be on one street and the other unit to be on the other street.
But didn't we say we didn't want to necessarily encourage that? Or that was just for corner lots?
Why wouldn't you? So then you're decreasing the massing, which is one of your major objectives.
You
So you're
wouldn't wanna-
making it look like a single family house instead of a duplex. So on one side of the street, you're gonna see, one double garage, chances are, and then you're gonna see what looks like a single family house. So on each street is gonna look like a single family house instead of a duplex.
And I guess the answer to that was, if you're on a really, really busy street, I don't want any driveways. I'd rather have my kids not get killed and be able to exit on the slow street. So we weren't trying to force it. Both sides were front. We're trying to say both sides should look really good. And whatever makes the most sense is where your entry should be, but both sides should be treated as front yards and have all this same aesthetic appeal, regardless of what street you're on. And I think there are cases where there's a really busy street, and when you enter a neighborhood, if I had a duplex, I'd rather have the two driveways on the slower street, so that and I think there's a lot of that, going down Brigham, it's a busier street, and every little side street off of that, the houses turn sideways. Stirrup Brook did the same thing. There was a house on Bartlett. The front door was built there 110 years ago or 150 years ago. Now the front door is on Stirrup Brook because it's safer for the residents to come out of their driveways on the slower street.
But that's not true in every case.
No, it's
where
not.
Both one street would be super busy and the other one wouldn't. So
Exactly.
if you put may, then you're just saying that that's something that would be acceptable. And then it would be reviewed on a case-by-case basis, whether that's appropriate or not.
Can we put in reviewed on a case-by-case basis?
Yes, because they would come before design review.
That,
So if the other street is too busy, then you could say that you didn't want that configuration. I mean, I could even put in the language saying, as long as, about the busy street.
right, 'cause I agree, I agree with the safety and I agree with the look, and I think what happens is I'd rather not see, most of these places now, I don't see as a main entrance that serves two buildings. It seems like everything's separated. The front entrances, the driveways, they have garages, with the new style. And if we have the option to have one as the main and the second one not to look as the main, I think that doesn't necessarily go with the designs today. Is that right, Dario? Do you know what I'm saying?
I've seen that look before. It looks attractive.
Yeah, I think if it's done right, it can work any of those ways. I don't, it gets a little weird. My address is 1 Main Street and the house connected mine is, 28, Mill Street, and it's the same building. But that's, I think it can work both ways. I think it's really lot dependent. That's the big deal. If the lot works, that's fine. I'm thinking of like the intersection of Whitney and 290. If I got a house on Whitney, then I have to have a front door facing 290. You can always find exceptions to it. But I think the intent we hit really well was to make it look nice and treat both as front yards, because then your setbacks, your drives, your aesthetics, everything here applies to the front yard. And if you can have the two doors look separate, all the better. But there's a lot of cases where that wouldn't make sense. So I'm kind of, as long as they're front yards, I'm happy, because then you're not turning your back to one of the other streets aesthetically.
Well, you guys can figure that out. I like the case by case basis.
But I think
So
May,
I'll just put this back in and put may instead of shall. Is that the consensus?
Makes sense to me if it makes sense to everybody else. Because this is talking about covered entries, right?
Mhm.
And you may put one on each side, but you may not.
Well, in that part, if you, I don't know, if you put one on one and not one on the other, like I said, if somebody has a covered entry on one side, not on the other.
I don't know, maybe when we have a picture to go with it, like,
I can look for a picture.
do all units and duplexes, like, do all houses now have covered entries? It says each unit shall have a separate covered entry, like, the covered entries make sense on all designs.
And that's just the roof, right? The roof that comes down, it isn't necessarily enclosed, it's just got the roof. Is that what that means?
yeah, but to answer your question, Amy, any house, if you can, you want to cover the entry. So when you're standing at the front door with your groceries, it's not raining on your head. And
Mhm.
it could be as simple as a little 6x6 gable that just sticks proud of the building. But you could say a classic cape doesn't have that.
Mhm.
One of the most classic buildings in our area, neither does a colonial necessarily. A lot of those just had the front door that was flush. But anybody that has a house, I would guarantee you, if they could, they'd want a covered entry, just so when you're standing there opening the door, you're not getting the rain. You have a safety zone. So that's a tough one, because you would really be in the face of a lot of classic designs, two of them being a colonial and a cape, that if you look at them, they're very, because back then they didn't have the money. And so they would make them as just functional, I'm in or I'm out. But now the porches make so much more sense, both aesthetically and functionally.
I wonder if we just take that whole line out, like Lisa said, it's kind of covered above when we talk about the two front yards and facades. Or, I don't know, because I do know some classic capes, and if you did put a front on it, it might look kind of funny, or
Right.
an entryway.
And I think all the pictures that Lori sent had porches and covered entries because they soften the front. I mean, they do make the buildings look better. But there's classic buildings that I don't want a 200-year-old colonial to someone have to put a gable on the front. And gee, now the top of the gable pokes above the window, above the main entry. Oh, no, I'll do a shed on it, because a shed, or it gets crazy I think we can encourage, but it's tough. It's tough to make people put porches. I love them. I would want them everywhere, but I wouldn't want to tell someone with a classic house they had to put one on it.
I wonder if we leave it out, because the sentence above it kind of covers it. Front doors should be protected by recessed porch or other covered elements, but it says should, not shall.
Yeah,
I wonder if we don't need the second sentence, just because to me, it seems to be covered with that one. And also the corner lots covered with the discussion we had about the two front facades.
But maybe we can just move that sentence then, because I think it's really important to kind of spell it out as being an option, because otherwise the document doesn't do that. So this business about the duplexes on corner lots may place pedestrian entries on opposite streets.
Okay,
We
so that
can
sentence
move
you're
that
thinking,
sentence up to
Yep.
the other location.
yep,
That makes sense.
yep. And then the first sentence in this little paragraph just goes away because it's said above, kind of.
yeah, yes, I don't like the need not be on the front. The main entry into each unit need not be on the front facade. I would take that out.
Right, so we're just gonna keep the last sentence and move it up. Is that what you're saying, Lori?
Yes.
Okay, I agree with that.
Sounds good.
Okay, once you do that, the other question is, I don't know that it's on here, but Dario and I had talked about it a couple of other meetings ago about the walkways. Do we have something on here about walkways? You know how we had the front entrances of that last applicant that didn't even have the walkway from the front steps? It just went out onto the grass?
Yeah, that was just crazy to do. I mean, but it's weird. Yes, you should be able to access the front door by foot without going through the grass. I feel like if we have to tell people that, they shouldn't be designing the building. But
Yep.
I know that was sad because they had a duplex with a front porch. It was all beautiful and you couldn't get to it. And so we could put it in, but I feel like, you know, your windows should be transparent. It's the next thing we're going to put in.
Yeah, based on what happened, it's no longer an assumption. It's like,
No, all right, so.
Well, maybe
yeah.
under landscaping, we can write the front
Yeah.
entryway should have a walkway.
Yes, some type of an impervious or walkable surface when you walk off the very front porch, you're not landing in mud or grass.
all right, I didn't know if that was in here. I didn't really see it, but I thought it was kind of an important add, since we're doing. the front.
It's sad to say we have to put it in here, but I guess that makes sense.
Okay, I can add that. So windows and transparency, any changes there? I didn't have any. Did anybody else?
I don't think,
Okay,
oh,
And
I think
now-
your document had my changes, so I don't think I did.
okay.
I don't know
So
if anybody
then-
else did.
Architectural details.
No, I put the need to and not do should. Personally.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I eliminated a couple of words, because what we're talking about is the duplex. So
Right,
the
that makes
visual interest is in the duplex.
Yep.
And then also the good human scale, I think you meant pedestrian scale. So then I just added some additional clarifying language further into the paragraph, high quality and durable building materials. I added cement siding and stucco to that list, just to provide a variety of options.
For a duplex?
Yep.
Cement?
A cement siding, do you mean those siding boards, not just like a cement wall?
It's like hardy plank.
Yeah,
So it
I wonder if you
looks
should
like
write-
it wood siding, but it's very durable. You don't have to paint it as often, from what I understand.
do we have to write cement siding planks? Like, do you think anyone could look at that and say, I want a cement wall, like a cement side to my house?
No.
Because that's originally what I read, but I know my parents have the hardy cement planks.
Yeah, she's using the right word, Amy, because Hardy
Oh, okay.
Plank is a brand name. It's a cementitious plank, not a concrete wall, which is different.
Oh, okay.
Concrete includes cement, stone, rock, and everything else, but cement, people misinterpret cement to mean concrete, and cement is just an additive to concrete. Cement is the main additive to the Hardy Plank.
My father tells me that all the time. He's an architect, and I still get it wrong. I'll have to tell him you had to tell me again today.
There you go. I've been told my head is as hard as both.
So then I wanted to provide some additional landscape options. The distinctive paint scheme, I just wanted to specify that they can do that if it's consistent with the architectural style or theme. So that way, like if it's a Victorian style duplex, then it would be appropriate to have the multiple colors. If it's a colonial, probably not. So,
Agreed. Yeah, if it's a cape, you don't want to start highlighting a whole bunch of things.
Right.
And also, can you go back just 2 seconds?
Sure.
Lori, did we even have like cedar shakes and stuff as a high material quality? Is there any wood there?
I can put that in.
Yeah,
No,
like-
because I think cedar shakes is a big New England thing. You know, just some nice wood siding. You know, I think what we're trying to avoid is vinyl siding, but I think wood siding is, it's great. It's a little more maintenance, but it's, you know,
Should I just say wood siding and eliminate cedar
Yep.
shakes and shingle?
I think that's fine because that makes the point. It's a natural material that's used here all the time and done right. There's capes that are 200 years old that didn't have to get re-sided.
Okay.
Or you could put wood or cement siding.
That might help with Amy.
Okay.
All I could picture was a big concrete wall. I'm like, oh,
Kind of, you know, stucco was popular a while ago, but now when you see a stucco house, it's like, wow, it's certainly from the old days.
Yeah, it's unusual, but of course I wanted to build in flexibility with design.
I don't know how visually it would work, but maybe if they did a whole neighborhood.
Well, no, but the Tudor style is all stucco.
Oh,
And
okay.
that fits in places. I mean, stucco makes perfect sense.
Yep.
There's also a fair amount of new contemporary homes that have a flat outside wall that is essentially smooth stucco over some sort of a foam type border, EIFS or something like that, where
Ethos.
it's kind of an ultra modern design. I don't know if you'd see it here in town, but you do see it quite often in some of the houses inside of 495. Where some of these houses are, you know, they're pretty fairly modern and they kind of have a quasi stark appearance from the outside, and that's, you know, up to the designer. But that's another form of stucco as well.
So under massing and form, in the second paragraph, the language was a little awkward and it wasn't very clear to me where you were going. So I figured it wouldn't be clear to the average person. So I think the point here was to say that if you have a larger duplex next to a smaller single-family house, you wanted the elevation that is closest to the single-family house to be smaller in form, in mass. Did I get that right?
Yes,
Is that the point of this sentence
Yes.
here?
that's to not have one overpower the neighbor. You don't want the big guy, you know, maxed out and the little guy being dwarfed, especially if you build right up to the side lot.
So are you okay with this new language? I thought it was a little bit clearer to the average person. But of course, it may just be clear to me.
Yeah, I think gradually transitions the key word, you know, or be sensitive to the building height, you know, either one accomplishes the intent. So you can have a big house, but then you put the one little screened in porch next to the neighbor and all of a sudden now you're being more sensitive to it. So you have a 1-story, you know, pop out in a certain direction, then the scale isn't dwarfing the neighbor. And that's pretty simple to do.
Okay.
Can massing and form be moved up before the porches one? I'm looking here to see what under the building design, I guess.
Oh, you mean move the whole section, massing and form?
Yeah, because that's important. And then you go to covered entry after that. Don't you think?
Sure, I can move that.
Because that's kind of one of the bigger things that we start with. Okay, where is it located on the land? So, and then it's easier then to put landscaping in after, architectural details maybe.
Yeah, I really think landscaping should go last, because of course, all the other sections are talking about the building. And then we go to landscaping, so.
It's 10 o'clock. I just have to ask everybody, we're on page 10 out of 15. Do we want to keep going for another half an hour, or do we want to end it here and start off here next time? Or do you want to try to barrel through it?
We're doing so good, but I actually have to go to New Hampshire, so I'm gonna have to leave.
Okay,
We're doing so good. I'm like, but the thing is,
I know.
once I start, then I'm gonna be late for where I'm going, because this will end up going into, it could be 45 minutes, and I'm like, oh, I'm really
Yep.
close.
Well, that's just why, yeah, I want to call attention to the town.
There is likely somebody will come forward with, at the next meeting, because they have 2 duplexes that they want to put before you. It would be part of a neighborhood that consists of 3 lots, a single-family home and 2 duplexes on a common driveway. So I know they're eager for the design guidelines, because the architect wants to make sure that the design of the duplexes matches what you're looking for. So if it's okay with you, I can share them, kind of revise based on today's discussion and share what we have so far.
I think that's fine by me. They're seeing the sausage get made, and that's A-okay. If they look at the old design guidelines and then anything here, you just tell them if it's in this one, it's gonna take precedence over the old one, and we're not done.
Yeah.
And then that's not their problem, nor should they have to wait for us to finish this to move forward. That's not fair to them to stop them. So I think showing them the old one and what's in progress is the right thing to do to be fair to them.
Are you gonna make the corrections on the second one that you give, or is it gonna look like this with all the different corrections going on?
I can make a clean version. So, the sections that we've already gone through, I can kind of accept the changes. And of course, Bob and I have to work on the language in that paragraph on the first page. But I can make it look prettier. And then, of course, where we haven't gotten to, probably just leave that as is.
And then take out the photographs, because we haven't gotten that, we haven't done anything with the photographs.
Sure.
And,
Yeah, I think you should take out the pictures, just.
And my final recommendation before I go is, I would love to see it if we could change the actual name of this as the duplex guidelines. And even though it says 2-family, and in the paragraph that talks about the 2-family and the duplex being one and the same, why can't we keep it 2-family and duplex one and the same, but using duplex at the top, since that's more like what we're working with?
The only thing is the
add the
zoning
word.
bylaws say 2-family.
But the book says that we use it interchangeably already. The guidelines say we're using this interchangeably. So even though the zoning says that, this is it's what we usually do. People aren't coming forward for 2 families.
I would
What if it-
recommend sticking with the 2-family, because that's what's in the zoning book.
I
What if
would,
we say
I would
guidelines?
stick-
for-
yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I would stick consistent, and then you can put in parentheses duplexes. But so that if someone's into planning and they're looking for duplexes, it doesn't show up anywhere. I think the title should match. It's another one of those inconsistencies, but it should match.
Right.
Put in parentheses duplexes, but unless we change the zoning bylaws, that's a nightmare for somebody, again, to try to read the fine print. Well, there's a paragraph here that says they're the same. We're not trying to trick people or catch people on stuff. We're trying to make their lives easy. So if it's consistent, I think it makes sense. And I think you could put in parentheses next to it, duplexes, then there's no confusion. That's my opinion.
I agree with that too, just because of the zoning bylaws say 2-family, and then at some point we can update them and fix them all, but
I agree.
If we scroll through exterior materials, we might, I don't know how many minutes you have, Lisa, but I don't know if we had any changes. At least we
Nope.
could say, if there are no changes, maybe we get through it.
Including but not limited to. All right, so isn't that redundant? Didn't we just do that? Including but not limited to horizontal wood siding, shakes and brick, stucco and other trowel finishes should be trimmed in masonry or wood. Well, I kind of like that though. I like the trimmed in wood. All right. Horizontal wood. All right. How about if you change the horizontal wood / cement siding? Does that help to make it more consistent with the top?
Sure.
But not limited to horizontal wood, comma. Well, wood in cement siding and then take out the shake siding. Oh, but I like the brick.
Well, horizontal wood siding and shake siding are different.
I like it. That's all right. I'd leave it alone.
Are you folks okay with vertical? That's kind of style that is around these days. It's kind of the farmhouse style, where they have a mixture of horizontal and wood and vertical. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's board and batten, I think you're talking about.
Yeah. I could add board and batten.
I think you have it down there somewhere. I forget where.
Oh, it's in the next paragraph.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
What is a T111 siding?
Oh, you don't want T111. Texture 111. That's basically a piece of plywood that they score line. Yes, thank you, Bob. It's the cheapest thing on the planet. It's like a 1/4-inch thick piece of plywood that they score striations to try to pretend it's vertical siding. And it's awful.
Okay, good, because it says don't use it.
Yes, no, yes, I would.
All right, yep, keep that. All right, go to the next page if we can. I might be able to give you one more.
Sorry, I don't know
This
what time you.
design, the only change I had is I think they meant to say planes instead of plans.
You have to scroll down a little, Lori.
Oh, sorry. I'm not used to
Multitask.
having documents on there. See, I just got rid of, it was originally plans, but that didn't make sense. So I think it's supposed to be planes.
That's great. Okay,
And then there was no other change.
Oh, look at that, see?
yeah, and the building is.
And then if we want to stop at building height, if you have to go, because I think there will be a little discussion here, maybe.
Okay, that sounds like a plan.
All right, awesome.
Oh,
Up
yeah.
here. Okay,
Great
so
job,
I'll
guys.
make
I think-
those changes. My goal is to send these over to the architect as soon as possible. So this is something that I'm gonna do today.
Great.
And then I'll email it to you.
Good job.
Okay,
And if you want to, when you send it over to him, maybe take out our comments for the till the end. Like, I don't know if it matters. If he
Yeah.
sees all our comments going forward,
I'd rather be private, just.
yeah, he can have the version with our mark, without our comments.
okay,
Yeah.
very good.
Thanks so much, everybody. Does anybody else have anything to add quickly before we make a motion to adjourn?
Nope. I think we did a good job.
I make a motion to adjourn.
A second,
Okay, roll call vote. Lisa Maselli? Dario Demar?
I